A roll call, since we do have a new person. If we could just start down at the very end, and then we'll work our way.
Okay, Philip Muzichenko, alternate for Military Hill.
David Macon, and the alternate for Multicultural.
Richard Hume, Pioneer Hill.
Nathan Dean, alternate for parent of a Pullman school child.
Quentin Mercumpus, ASWSU.
And I'm Stephanie Rink, the chair, also the Pullman School District parent.
Business Community, Eric Tetzlaff for Business Community.
Barbara Hammond, College Hill.
Phyllis Stahlkopf, Sunnyside Hill.
Commander Chris Tennant, sitting in for Chief Jenkins, who's on vacation this week.
Darby Baldwin, Administrative Assistant at the Police Department.
Amira Al-Bakshi for GBSA at the WSU.
Great, thank you. Next on our agenda is the approval of minutes. I'm sure all of you are well versed in the minutes that Darby sent out. Are there any objections, edits, concerns? Darby did a fantastic job. There are no edits. Can I get a motion?
I will move to approve the minutes as we have them, yes.
I second it.
All in favor to approve, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. We will then move on to our DARE and SRO presentation by Officer Scott Patrick. The floor is yours.
Thank you. If you have questions along the way, please feel free to interrupt me. I would rather treat this as a dialogue than a presentation, quite candidly. I'll tell you a little bit about me. Here's all my contact information. I have had a lengthy, I guess, tenure with the police department. I'm in my 31st year. I started in 1988. I was the first College Hill officer after the riot in 1998, so I got some experience with that. I spent from 2000 till July of 2013 assigned to the Quad Cities Drug Task Force, a multi-jurisdictional drug task force, and I believe Officer Germer came in last month, and talked about his time and service in that entity. I've been the school resource officer since July of 2013 to current, and recently received another 3-year term, so I will run till July 1st of 2022. So a couple of pictures of me and my roles in my time within the police department. I've also been a firearms instructor. I've been part of our SWAT team. Currently I'm a negotiator on our crisis negotiation team, and a couple of other odds and ends along the way. So I've had kind of a long career. Come on in. I'll let you get seated. How are you? So, SRO DARE is kind of a combined position. I refer to myself as a school resource officer and as a DARE instructor secondarily. We used to have a DARE officer position, and we've kind of changed that a little bit because what we do in the role that I'm currently in encompasses a whole bunch of different things, not just DARE. DARE is one component of my job. So we operate off of a triad concept. I'm an informal counselor with student, staff, parents. I'm an educator. I provide programming to not only for DARE in the elementary schools, but I also provide programming for our high school students in drug recognition, drug abuse, drug awareness, online safety issues. This last year I did a presentation for all of the middle schoolers over a 3-day time period about internet online safety, done some bullying, education with students and staff, and then I'm also a law enforcement officer. So that's kind of the triad concept that we operate off of. When I came into the position in 2013, hopefully we can get here, some of the things that I like, and I'll back up a little bit, some of the things that I liked about the position was I was told, make it your own. Do things the way that you see fit. run however you want to run things. And I went back to the chief and I said, well, first of all, I like that idea. I'm an independent thinker. I like that ability to work within the system and work within parameters. I said, but what's my mission? What's our goal in all of this? So I sat down with the chief. I sat down with school district staff, came up with a mission statement. I actually have it printed on the back of my business cards, and I'm going to give all of you guys business cards so you can read it in its entirety. I'm not going to read it because it's rather wordy and lengthy. But basically, we've defined what our mission is as a school resource officer, which I think is really, really important, because if you don't know what your mission is or your goal is, what are you doing? How are you accomplishing? What are the expectations? We've worked over the last probably 6 years in more formalizing what my role is within the school district and within the police department as well. So we'll move forward. All right, so here's our mission. So being a positive role model, build positive relationships. I think, to me, that's the most critical part of this. Building relationships with not only students, which is primarily, I think, is the most important thing, but building relationships with staff members, faculty, parents, those types of things. Safety and security of students and staff. Because of recent events, safety at schools has become kind of paramount in everyone's minds. So I'm actively involved in planning of, if we have an active shooter event within the schools, we review plans within the school district in each of the buildings yearly, look at what's working, we look at best practices, look at all of those things. I also have provided training to staff members as well within the school district. I'm also a resource for students, staff, and parents. And then intervention, crime prevention. That's where the education component comes in. What can we do to help kids make better choices, make safer choices? Here are my responsibilities. I investigate all criminal complaints on school grounds. I'm currently responsible for 5 schools, soon to be 6. Sometimes that can be daunting because there's only one of me and there's only so much time in a day. But I get to try to divide my time. My primary responsibility is at the high school. I have an office at the high school. I'm there as much as I can be, but I get called to all the other schools as well. I spend, outside of DARE, and we're going to talk about DARE here in a little bit, I don't spend a lot of time at the elementary schools because of the ages and kind of the nature of things that go on at the elementary schools. I spend most of my time at the high school, but some of my time at the middle school. And as things have developed and changed over time, we've talked about getting a second SRO to put in the middle school. We applied for a grant a couple of years ago and weren't given that grant, or weren't awarded the grant. But I think that moving forward as our organization, as our community grows, I think is really, really important to establish. We do a pretty good job establishing that relationship with 5th graders through the DARE curriculum, and then we kind of lose them in the middle between middle school and high school. And if you know anything about middle schoolers, they're trying to figure out where they fit in life, who their friends are. That's a critical development part of their lives. And I think the more that we can be involved from the law enforcement side in a positive way, I think that can be really, really helpful. So that's been one of my long-term goals in the 6 years that I've been in the position. So also one of my responsibilities is to provide resources and or training in areas of my expertise. 14 years in the drug task force. I get asked a lot of drug questions. So that's one of my areas of expertise. And then I'm the liaison between the police department and school district. I work with a bunch of really, really good people on the school district side who really, really care about kids. We have a really good working relationship, and I think that has been really, really helpful in helping us solve problems together. I have kind of a philosophy that we try to handle things at the lowest possible level. If it doesn't need my intervention, I try to stay out of things. And as an SRO, I'm not at all responsible for discipline. So if your kid does something that is disciplinary in nature, I'm not involved in that. If it's a crime, then I get involved. But oftentimes it's handled at the lowest possible level. So, and then I address parental student questions and or concerns. My phone rings pretty much off the hook 5 days a week from parents. I get questions all the time from kids and other staff members. I will say this, when we have shooting events, active shooting events in schools, that ratchets up the number of phone calls I get and questions I get about Pullman and school safety and what are we doing as a community, what are we doing as a police department to make sure that our schools are safe. So, I'll back up. Sorry about that. So like I said, those are kind of my primary responsibilities. I try to float as best I can to some of the schools. Oftentimes I don't have that time. And like I said, I'll back up a little bit too. When I first came into the position, one of my goals was to get the DARE curriculum into the middle school. Because of the structure of the middle school and the curriculum that they are teaching, there's just no way where it fits. But I am certified to teach middle school stuff too. So, you guys have any questions about what my responsibilities, what my roles are within the schools or school district? I don't get summers off. I get that question all the time too.
I do have a question.
Yes.
What is the difference of your role between the high school and the middle school? How different is it?
The same. So, if there is a crime at the middle school, I would go down and investigate that. I try, again, I get pulled in 5 different directions, soon to be 6. I try to spend time there, and that has been, I'm not going to say disappointment, but it is kind of a disappointment. I don't have enough time because of the nature of the things that I'm dealing with the high school, the problem solving that we're doing. It's not, I'm not taking anything away from patrol officers, but you don't respond to a call, handle the call clear, and within a very short period of time. Oftentimes these problems are in depth that take time to investigate, take time to build that relationship, build that rapport, solve those problems, or at least give directions, and that. So that's a time-consuming process. I get asked all the time, what's a day look like for you? And I'm like, depends on the day, I have meetings or people I have to meet with. I oftentimes get called. By way of example, I was following up on something today at one of the elementary schools first thing in the morning. I spent the afternoon at the high school. From lunch, I try to get in there about lunchtime because that's typically when we have problems. But then I got called to something else this afternoon to handle. So it kind of really, really varies. And like I said, I took a very different approach than some of my predecessors. I dress like this every day, pretty much. Although I think the commanders probably noticed in the last couple of months, I've been in uniform more than I've probably been like this. Yeah. And part of that is we are very short-staffed. And so I'm also responding at times to help our patrol officers with things as well. So it is what it is. But I did this. I stepped out of a uniform. Particularly with high school kids, I think it's a much softer approach and much more approachable. Building those relationships, building that rapport with kids, I think is really, really important. I will tell you, my first experience in the high school, the first year I was in, for the first month or so, I could walk down the hallway and no one would acknowledge me, look past me and everything else. And over time, that has changed, and it took a little bit of time for people to get used to me, students to get used to me and stuff, but that's why I did what I did as far as softening the approach. And I think this is much more approachable than the uniform is. But the uniform helps at times too. It confuses little kids though. But it is what it is. So, yes, ma'am.
It's sort of a two-part question with regard to criminal complaints on school grounds.
Yes.
So the first thing I was thinking is, does everybody know what's a crime and what's just a complaint? And the second thing is, what kinds of criminal complaints do you have to respond to? I mean, are there that you respond to?
So I'm going to have to drill down to the first part of your question. when you say, does everyone know, who are you speaking of? Staff, or are you talking about students?
Probably both.
We try to educate as best we can, but there's some commonsensical things. Punching people is a crime. Alcohol, drugs, those types of things are crimes. Social media, the advent of social media and some of the things that kids have access to. Kids are pretty tech savvy and understand that some of the things that they're doing on their devices are criminal in nature. With that being said, bullying, and the word bullying I believe gets overused a little bit. But there are parts of bullying that are actually criminal conduct. So if I'm doing stuff online, harassing somebody online, that may be a crime. And we try to provide education early on as best we can. And then, like I said, I try to handle things at the lowest possible level. Oftentimes, that gets handled within the school disciplinary process, although the school legislatively is having their abilities to discipline severely limited and restricted. And coming in July, I think it's going to be even more restricted as far as that. The second part of your question, ask me again. Just blanked.
You probably have answered it, but what kinds of criminal behaviors and complaints are most frequent for you to have to respond to?
Assaultive behavior. We're dealing with a lot of mental health issues right now, particularly as we get towards the end of the school year. Kids that have mental health issues or have unstable home lives and that kind of stuff, we're starting to see behaviors acting out, behaviors because of the uncertainty of what summer brings. School is a very structured environment for them and can be a very calming force in their life and help them, and they have access to adults and they have access to resources. Going away for the summer or leaving that comfort zone for the summer, the last month has been one thing after another in several of the schools that I work in. That's commonplace. Assaultive behavior is probably the biggest thing that I deal with. Some of the online harassment or bullying or sexual images I deal with, vandalism to the school. Has anyone come in and talked to you guys about vaping? I better not set myself up for that. Vaping is an epidemic. If you don't know what vaping is, it's electronic cigarettes, nicotine in liquid form that superheated, and vaping is a big thing within middle school all the way through high school. So an ongoing problem for us, ongoing conversation between me and high school administration about how to handle that moving forward because of how prevalent it is. And it's not only at Pullman High School, it's everywhere in the country.
Is that legal?
If you're over 18, it is. But
what's the average age of our high school students, freshman to senior?
14 to 18. So
illegal at 18?
It will, well, that's going to change in 2020. In 2020, it goes to 21. So that may change the dynamic as well of what we're dealing with.
What about opioids?
That's still illegal. Doesn't matter how old you are.
Is it a big problem in Pullman? Or?
Not amongst school-age kids. There are people. We have students that have opioid addiction problems. But I think I hear it all the time, there's a drug problem at the high school. I've been here 30 years. We've had a drug, Commander Tenhall will back me up on this. We've had a drug problem for 30 years, haven't we, at the high school? Pretty much, yeah. If you know anything about students, if you take any high school across the country, your average, you're looking at 10 to 15% of your student population that is experimenting with whatever, whether that's alcohol, tobacco, marijuana, opioids, whatever. So it's 10 to 15% of your population. We have about 900 kids at Pullman High School. That's 90 to 115, I think, my math is working there today. If you put me and my 3 administrators in a room, we could probably identify all 90 kids, 90 to 100. There'd be a couple of surprises, but by and large, we are aware of. Now, with that being said, because I'm aware of something doesn't mean I actually can do something about it, if that makes any sense. There has to be some things that happen for us to be able to address those issues. But we're well aware, so we're trying to work on that part of it as well. So, yes?
If you are aware, do you alert the parents?
Depending on the circumstances, yes. And alert staff members if they have concerns, issues. I'll paint a scenario for you. Student leaves for lunch, goes and ingests marijuana, and I know this is right up your alley. Goes and ingests marijuana off campus, comes back on campus, appears to be under the influence, gets into a classroom, teacher makes observations that they appear to be under the influence. They'll be brought down to the office, administrator contacted. The administration can do things that I can't do legally. They can search students. They can do other things that I can't do legally. If they don't find anything on them, I don't get involved necessarily or per se, and a parent is contacted. And that has happened several times this year. And it becomes a safety concern. And I know that this is kind of weird, and we've created some interesting dynamics in this state. I change that scenario a little bit. They go off campus and they drink. They come back on campus under the influence, get contacted, brought down. I get brought in. I can actually, that's actually a crime for them to be under the age of 21, showing the signs of having consumed alcohol. There is no parallel to that for marijuana. So they can come in under the influence, not a thing I can do to them as long as they don't have marijuana on them. So that creates,
marijuana is not legal until 21.
Yep.
Huh.
Because once they ingest it, they're no longer in possession of it.
Now, wait a minute, I thought marijuana was legal.
It is if you're over 21.
21, okay.
Yeah. So not to 21. So it kind of puts an interesting dynamic and interesting spin on things. And when I say that to teachers, they look at me kind of funny, like, what do you mean you can't do anything about it? I said, I can't. Unless you find marijuana on them, there's not a thing I can do about it. So, yeah, so it creates an interesting dynamic. So, yes, ma'am.
And have you noticed that, like, the level of crime is, like, vary between freshman, junior, senior, or like is it more with the freshmen or seniors? Like,
I think there's a learning curve. How's that? There's a learning curve, and I think students are always going to take chances. They're always going to make choices. I have kind of a weird philosophy. I look at things from a different perspective. I actually want kids to make mistakes because most of the time they have a support system in place. They have the consequences in most incidents are significantly less because we treat kids different than we treat adults. So I'm okay with kids making mistakes as long as they don't keep repeating that mistake over and over and over and over again. So it is what it is. So I'll move on to my next part of this because I'll skip through this really quick. All right. So the DARE curriculum or DARE program, Drugs Abuse Resistance Education. Back in the 80s, LAPD started the program. Curriculum has changed significantly since the early 80s till now. I will tell you this, it's all, and that slide's actually wrong because it's been several years ago. So we've taught the DARE curriculum to 5th graders since 1989. Rick Paringer, who is our property officer, is actually the first DARE officer. Started teaching in 1989. It was 17 lessons, and now it's 10. It's like I said, the curriculum has changed and developed over the years. We started teaching the new curriculum in 2012, I believe. That's right, because Officer Emerson, who was my predecessor, was one of the first officers to get that. His group was one of the first groups to get the new curriculum. It's all research-based. Penn State University did all the research behind it. All peer-reviewed, efficacy-based. They go back and check and see how we're doing. It's a wonderful, wonderful curriculum. I should have brought one of my books with me. I can probably bring it in later. It's all kid-centered. Penn State, when they did the research, they actually talked to kids. They brought in kids, talked to them about things that they're dealing with, issues, how to deal with things. It's not Nancy Reagan's just say no to drugs. The elementary school curriculum that is taught to 5th and 6th grade, in our case 5th grade, there's one lesson, it's the second lesson, and we talk about alcohol and tobacco. That is the only lesson out of the 10 lessons that has anything to do with drugs. It's all life skills. We give them a decision-making model. We work through the decision-making model, all 10 lessons. How do you make a decision? We talk about, it's basically life skills. We teach them consequences. We teach them risk, what risks and consequences are. We teach them how to confidently communicate, which is one of my favorite lessons to teach the kids. Very, very engaging. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful program. I think the kids get a lot out of it. And like I said, it's not drug-based. It's all life skills-based. I'm also, like I said, I'm certified to teach the middle school curriculum, which builds on this curriculum, but we just don't have a place where we can do that. And I think from my perspective, long-term, if we could get another SRO, make one of them permanent at the high school, and then the other person would be at the middle school, and then teaching the DARE curriculum during the fall to elementary school kids. And that way we could bridge from elementary school through middle school all the way through the high school, which I think is really important and really critical to what we're trying to do, and how that flows, and the positive things that we can do with kids in a more positive direction, not necessarily from an enforcement direction, but from a helping direction. Like I said, that triad, informal counselor, educator, and law enforcement. And to me, that the most critical part of our program that we do is that relationship building with kids. So, and we've been pretty successful in that. Any questions? Yeah.
Yeah, so you mentioned like the tobacco, like part of that training. Is that also like incorporating some of the newer advents like you talked about, like, you know, e-cigarettes? Okay.
Yep. And that has only been within the last couple of years that we've had to throw that in as part of that lesson plan. So I spend 10 weeks in the classroom with each class, each 5th grade class. Lessons are about 45 minutes to an hour long, so I spend about 10 hours with each group. They have to write a report to be able to pass through the curriculum. We have a graduation event, which I've tried to grow and develop and make bigger over the last 5 years. It's at the high school, and it's going to continue to be at the high school because the high school is a better venue for us with the new building and that. So it's fun. It's a good time. So I don't want the commander to hear this, but I have the best job in the department. By far. By far. So.
And you teach this in the fall?
Yeah. So my falls get compressed pretty tight. So 2 years ago I was 10 hours a week in the classroom in the elementary schools. Last year I was 9 hours, and I think this year, looking at projected numbers, I'm going to be about 9 hours. So there'll be 2 5th grade classes at Kamiak. Now that I've said this, 2 at Kamiak, 2 at Franklin, 3 at Jefferson, and 2 at Sunnyside. So that's 9. Yeah, that's 9. So it'll be a busy fall.
And positively view, I taught middle school in Phoenix, Arizona for 3 years before I decided I have to get an easier way to earn a living and become a professor.
Yes.
But I think when you're dealing with middle school students, you probably, and that's what I taught, you probably have more influence than any other point in their growth.
Yep. Absolutely. And that's like I said, we do a good job in 5th grade dealing with and interacting, and then we have a 3-year gap, which to me is the most critical developmental part of potentially part of their development, because that's where you start to see kids start to wander and start to find themselves in what they're doing and that, and I think it's critical for us. But, you know, like I said, there's only one of me and 6 schools, so it is what it is.
Sounds like you're understaffed.
Yeah. Have been for a while. So, anything else I can do for you? Well, I appreciate your time. If you have any questions, I'm going to leave Darby all my cards, or not all of them, but I'm going to leave her a stack of my cards. If you have any questions or anything, don't hesitate to call me. Normally, I'm pretty prompt in responding. However, I am leaving on Friday, and I won't be back until July. So.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sad to say, my kids missed the DARE since we moved here. My daughter started 6th grade, and my other one was 5th grade, but in the spring semester, so I missed that. But moving on, police department update.
That would be me. I came in just right before the meeting started, and I said, "Did the chief leave any notes?" And Darby looks at me real quick, and
I was like, oh no.
but he did. And when it comes to staffing, yes, we're very short on staffing, and so we're always juggling. And hiring is what I'm going to kind of update you now on. We're authorized to have 33 commissioned officers. We had 3 in the Spokane Academy, and then one of the 3 resigned a couple of weeks ago. And so now we have 2 in the Spokane Academy. They should graduate on June 19th. And so
what would that bring you up to?
Well, that was officers 27 and 28.
Out of 33?
Out of 33. Now, we just hired a lateral by the name of Garrett Willis. He started May 31st, and he lives in Moscow, and he was going down to Lewiston to work. And we convinced him to come over to Pullman, and the pay was a little bit better, and the commute was a little shorter. So the nice thing about it is he already knows how to be a cop, and the state of Washington requires that instead of a 725-month academy, he's only required to go to a 2-week academy to learn basically Washington laws. We still put them through the same field training schedule program that everybody else goes through, but because we don't want to short train him, just assuming that he knows everything. We want to make sure we go through, and generally laterals accelerate through the program on their own speed because they're able to accomplish everything that we need to accomplish, but we don't schedule it that way. So when he gets back, he'll start that. So he was number 29. We have gone through interviews and will hire Rick Gannett and Kayla Nuxel. They start the academy in August, and it'll run through December, and that's hire number 30 and 31. And then we currently have 2 applicants in background, and backgrounds take a couple of months, and that is number 32 and 33. So.
Now, are you hiring for another SRO, or is that just his strength?
No, it's just Rick. We would, in fact, the SRO is the only specialty position we have left in the police department. 5 years ago, there was a College Hill officer, there was a Quad City Drug Task Force officer, there was a detective that only worked with children's sexual crimes. And all of those positions have gone away and melted back into patrol and just to staff the road. So the SRO is the only one that we have kept not because we don't need that body on the road, but because both the chief and I and Scott Patrick feel that communication with the schools and the school district and the students and the parents is so vital to carrying forth our mission that there's just a world of difference when, parents run into problems and they call a patrol officer, and the patrol officer don't know who the parents are, they don't know who the teachers are, they don't know who the kids are. Scott Patrick, the SRO, he deals with all these people. He already has a rapport with all of them, and he just melts right in, and you don't have to talk to strangers. And that program is worth it. Now, we'd love to have another one, but we just don't have the money or the staffing to do that. We've gone to the school district and says, you pay for a second one. And of course, the school district doesn't have any money either. And so that's kind of where it is. I think, in 5 years, it wouldn't surprise me if we have a second SRO, because the program is so well thought of, but the financing right now is just not there. So that's kind of where we are on staffing for patrol officers. What you don't know is that behind the scenes, we're at one time we had 3 officers on light duty. One was a broken elbow that occurred on duty, fighting a subject. He had to have surgery on his elbow. So that's, one of the staff positions. We moved them into the detective's position, and they do casework in there for us. Another guy has a back injury that was off duty. We moved him into detectives, and he's handling a lot of those other cases that he can do on the phone and computer work and calls that come in on the front desk. And then we have a third guy that had shoulder surgery, and again, that's nothing to do with work. We're getting older. And so that's, 3 positions that we don't have on the road responding to calls that we need to fill too. We also have a sergeant that's going in for knee surgery next week. And so, when it's not just the numbers, we have 25 or so officers that are working the road, but by the time you split that number into 3 shifts, because we are 24/7, 7 days a week, we do have to give them days off, and sick leave and vacation and all these other things that normal people get. And all of a sudden, minimum staffing of 3 officers at any one time during the WSU school year, and then in the summer we drop that staffing back to 2 at any one time. So that's that. So, positive news is 2 recruits that are going through the field training program. Mr. Holden finished his FTO program several weeks ago. He is currently out on patrol on his own, so that was good news. St. Andre is in his 4th phase of field training. It's the shadow phase. We're done teaching him anything. We just want to make sure we're confident that he can do everything, and we end up putting either another officer out there just to follow him around, or we put him in plain clothes and act like a citizen, a citizen ride-along, because the public are pretty smart and savvy, because they'll go up, 2 officers show up and they go right to the senior officer, and so if they know if there's any hesitation or anything, they pick up on that, and they just deal with the senior officer. So a lot of times we'll put that senior officer in plain clothes, and so they don't look official, and then it forces them to go to the recruit, and then you can see how they perform in a much better manner.
Yeah, we know.
So June 20th, St. Andre is supposed to be getting out of field training. We'll have his last, and he's doing really well, so I'm assuming we'll be moving him to solo patrol at that point. We have, or will hire, a code enforcement officer starting June 30th, and that'll be the fourth and final position to fill in that place. Record specialists, we have 2 vacancies. Ari Pons was a records clerk. She went to be a code enforcement officer, so that's one position. And then Katie Nelson's last day is June 22nd. She's going to law school, right?
Yep.
Going to law school. That seemed like a better deal. So those 2 people have been identified, and they're currently in background. Record specialist Josh Sanders, let's see if I get this right on the first reading, obtained a public records officer certification from the Washington Association of Public Records Officers, WAPRO. And it's a kind of a big deal. It's a multi-year process, and there's very stringent training requirements and documentation. And as far as I know, he's the first Pullman Records officer to ever receive this level of certification. And so that was kind of nice. Upcoming events is on Saturday, June 22nd is a busy day. There's 2 events at the exact same time. There's a community safety fair at the WSU Visitor Center. We'll have an officer there with a drone and with drone demonstrations and talking about what it is and how we use it. We'll also have a little bike rodeo thing going on for the little kids. Also, there's a Touch a Truck event at the Pullman Christian School at the same time, 10 o'clock in the morning to 2 in the afternoon. And we'll have a code enforcement officer there and also a police officer to kind of look at the cars and the trucks, and the kids can actually push the button for the siren and that kind of stuff. So they like it. So.
And the adults too.
That's it. Questions, comments? Cool.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to our constituencies poll. How about we start on this side?
Phyllis Dahlkopf, Sunnyside Hill, and I have nothing to report.
Barbara Hammond, College Hill, and really the only thing to report is that it seemed like last week was when final move-out happened, and people weren't quite in tune with Pullman Disposal, that you don't just put all your old furniture and mattresses on the sidewalk and leave it there. So a big truck came around today and certainly picked up the 2 on my street, and I'm hoping also got many others that I had seen. So, and it was on the police Facebook site that please don't do this. So I was appreciative of seeing that. One of those things was my next door neighbor. So, but otherwise, it's nice and quiet.
Eric Tetzloff, nothing to report.
Stephanie Rink, the Pullman School District parent. Nothing to report except the school's out on the 14th. My kids are so super excited about it. We had a 4-way stop, Bishop and Grand, right? That's Grand. No, Maine.
Yeah.
I say we not do that again because nobody knows how to do 4-way stops. Sat behind some people for a long time.
So I'm Quentin Bercumpus at ASWSU. I don't have anything to report, but I'm just kind of happy to be here.
Nathan Dean, alternate to the Pullman School District parent, and nothing to report.
Jaya Sivakumar, Military Hill, and I have just one item. So on Greyhound Way, right across from from where the fields, like parents park their car and sometimes students too, and it's a little bit curvy, and people are standing there and just chatting with fellow people, and so while driving it's kind of risky, and I don't know. I've noticed it many times.
There across from Emily is you get congestion.
Yeah.
And then there's a crosswalk there too.
Yes, correct.
And you do have to pay attention. We're aware of it.
Okay, but I wish even those people would kind of consciously move to the inside where the sidewalk is and not be on the outer side so that it's not adding to the problem.
Okay.
So they just seem relaxed and drinking and talking. It's like, where's the consciousness, right? I mean, so we have to be careful, overly careful. So, I don't know, something could happen before long.
Speed's also an issue there too, so.
Richard Hume, Pioneer Hill. No issues, except I'm going to get on my soapbox for a minute. You gave me an opening with staffing issues in the police department. When I came to the history department at WSU in '68, and I bet when Barbara's husband came to English, every member of the history department was tenure or tenure track. Now we've got the majority of the people in the history department at WSU are basically slave labor.
Clinical.
They're on 1 year, 2 year, 3 year appointments, teaching outrageous numbers of classes, and tuition is going up at WSU. This is a scandal. It's just a scandal. If the public knew what was going on here, we'd all be in jail, or we should be.
Duly noted.
So David Macon, the multicultural alternate. Nothing on that side, though. As a parent, now that I have to go to the high school more frequently, I would love to see if there's anything that can be done about, when they leave school and the traffic there, like a roundabout. I don't know what it would take, but it takes forever to, it takes forever to get out of that parking lot. And I don't know what can be done, but it's just.
It's a nightmare.
I know. There's and having been here from elementary, from kindergarten all the way through, parking has always been, it doesn't matter, right? They're always been that way. But I just hope that at some point we can have a smoother transition at the high school. It just, particularly with kids driving, and then we were watching kids almost hit each other. It's just, there's got to be a safer, smarter way of releasing all of those people at the same time.
I think that's the worst parking lot in town.
It's just, nothing on the diversity side, but if we could figure out a way to make that a smoother process. At least by the time my kids are out of high school, right? Solve it by then. And I'll even give it up. Give me 3 years, and then you solve it in the 4th year, and I'll be like, oh, it's okay. Just solve it for some parent event.
Lutchenko, alternate from Military Hill, nothing to report today.
Namir Al-Bakshi from for the HPS side, nothing to report today.
Great, thank you. Any public comment? Would you like to add about the parking or the driving issues? Anything else for the good of the order?
Yeah, I'd like to add one point I forgot to make. In the time I've been here since 1968, the WSU administrative staff has risen by 826%.
On that note, we will go to our next meeting, which is July 8th. I know, I'm just trying to count after the 4th. I'm like, when is the 4th? So July 8th here, we'll have a wonderful meeting for you. What are we doing on July 8th?
I think the chief was trying to get, was it wayfaring?
Wayfinding.
Yes, wayfinding. Someone's coming to discuss wayfinding, I believe.
Wayfinding is where you're trying to find somebody and they're going to be signed, or somebody will be there to help you locate where you need to go. They do it a lot in conferences and stuff.
Okay.
So that is wayfinding.
Well, maybe I should come back.
I think that is good.
Yeah. All right, thank you everyone. We are adjourned.